In this video, we're going to talk about lesson 3.6. So in this lesson, you were given a formula for blood alcohol content, and you were told what the different variables in this formula represent. So B is the percent of blood alcohol in the body. N is the number of standard drinks. That's a 12-ounce beer, 5-ounce glass of wine, or a 1.5-ounce shot of liquor. In order to use this formula, N should be at least 1. W is the weight in pounds of the individual. R is the distribution rate. It differs for males versus females, so it's 0.68 for male and 0.55 for a female. T is the number of hours since the first drink was consumed. So we're going to begin with question 2, where we're considering a male student who has 3 beers and weighs 120 pounds. We're going to simplify the equation as much as possible. All right, so I have the equation written again here. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Okay, here we go. So I've written the equation, and again, in the description, we were told that we had a male student who had 3 drinks, so N is 3. He weighed 120 pounds, so W will be 120. And since he is male, R is equal to 0.68. So we're going to start by just substituting in the values that we are given. We are not given B. I'm just rewriting the formula here so you can really see the comparison between the two. All right, so now in place of T, I'm going to not put anything because we don't know T yet. T is what's missing. But in place of N, I am inputting 3, and that means times 3. So 2.84 times 3. I'm using parentheses for multiplication. Same thing in the denominator, 120 times 0.68. And then we're going to simplify this expression here, which means I can multiply the top, multiply the bottom. So on top I have 8.52, and on the bottom, multiplying 120 by 0.68, I have 81.6. So then I could go ahead and divide these two values, the top divided by the bottom. I still can't do anything with that first term because I do not know T, so that stays the same. So my simplified formula is B equals negative 0.05T plus 0.104. So we could then use this formula for that individual given the certain values of T, however many hours we have seen since his first drink. And you're asked to do that in question 3. So in question 3, you're told to use a simplified formula for when T is equal to 1, and for T is equal to 3, and for T is equal to 5. So 3 separate times we're going to take the value for T and put it into the formula, the simplified formula. So in place of T, I'm putting a 1. And again, that's multiplied. There's multiplication here. And then we're going to just simplify using order of operations. So I would multiply negative 0.015 times 1, and then add 0.104. Depending on your calculator, you might be able to type this entire expression in at once. But if your calculator only allows you to do one operation at a time, the first operation is multiplication and then addition. Don't forget that when you're multiplying, that you're multiplying by a negative. So when I go ahead and do those operations, I have B equals 0.089, and we're rounding to 2 decimal places, so 0.09. All right, so now we're going to do the same thing for when T is equal to 3. Go back to the simplified formula. Instead of T, we're replacing it with 3, and then go through the order of operations. So we will multiply and then add. So multiplying negative 0.015 times 3, and then to that answer adding 0.104. And when I do that, I have 0.059, which rounds to 0.06. And finally, for when T is equal to 5, again, going back to the original, replacing T with 5. And my order of operations are multiply and then add. Don't forget, once again, that we have a negative. And so when I simplify this expression, I have 0.029, which rounds to about 0.03. So let me just go back for a moment. So what we should notice is that the value for B goes down over time. So all right, excuse my screen for a second. All right, so what we notice here is that as time goes on, since his first drink, after 1 hour, 3 hours, 5 hours, the amount of blood alcohol in his body goes down, which is what we expect. All right, so for the next question, you were given that formula again, but you were asked to use it in a different scenario. So for question 4, we're asked to think about the operations that we had done when we were simplifying that formula. So think about what we did when we just went ahead in the last question. So let's jump to that. So in our simplified formula, we had gone through the same operations every single time. So the first thing that we did to t was multiply by negative 0.015. And then we went ahead and added whatever value we had after we multiplied, we added a 0.104. Now that's when we were simplifying the formula. We were given t, we were simplifying to find b. So what we're going to start to do is now solve an equation. So we're going to look in the next example about solving for t. So we want to think about what we did and we want to undo those operations. We're going to do them in the reverse order and we're going to do the opposite operations. So when we're solving for t, the first thing we're going to do is subtract 0.104, and that undoes the last step of addition, and then we will divide to undo the first step of multiplication. So we'll divide by negative 0.015. So we're changing the order of the operations and we're doing the opposite operations. All right, so for question 5, you were asked for this student how long it would take that male student's blood alcohol content to be 0.08 and then 0.0. So we are looking for time now, and we are given the value for B. So I'm just going to start by again rewriting the formula. And I'm replacing B with 0.08. And I'm looking for t now, so I'm going to reverse the operations that were done to t. The first thing that I'm going to undo is the addition, and I'm going to do that by subtraction. Whatever I do on one side of the equal sign, I have to do on the other, and that maintains the equality or maintains the balance of that equation. So I'm showing the subtraction underneath, and then going ahead and subtracting a 0.08 minus 0.104. And that gives me negative 0.024. And I'm rewriting what I have on the other side. Now, since the subtraction undid the addition, I can imagine that that's gone. The next operation that was happening was multiplication, so I'm now undoing that multiplication by dividing. We show dividing with a fraction bar. Do the same thing on the other side. Notice I'm dividing by the exact coefficient that's in front, negative 0.015. And when I divided negative by negative, it becomes positive, so that means my answer is reasonable. We're talking about time, so it is reasonable that my time is positive here. So it means it takes about 1.6 hours for the blood alcohol content to be the legal limit. So you're asked to do that same thing, but for a blood alcohol content of 0.0. And I'm just writing 0 in my equation. technically 0.0 means that it's rounding to 0, so technically there could be a little bit of alcohol in the body, but when we're solving the equation, putting 0 is the same. Right, but the operations that I'm doing are the same. I'm undoing those same operations. So I'm subtracting. So I have negative 0.014 equals negative 0.015t. And then to undo that multiplication, I will then divide. And do the same thing on the other side. And again, I should expect that I have a positive value for t. And I should expect it should be longer or more time than in the first case because we want the blood alcohol content to be lower, so we need more time for that to happen. When I divide, I have a 6.9. I rounded that to the nearest tenth, is about equal to t. Okay, so for question 6, you were given that simplified formula for a different person, for a female who weighs 110 pounds and who plans on going home in 2 hours. So you had the time, t, you had w, 110, female, that means r is 0.55. So all of that has been put into this formula already and has been simplified. So notice the denominator is just now one value. This first term has been simplified because we multiplied by t. So for part A, we're going to look at what happens for 1 glass versus 3 glasses of wine. So we're changing n. Okay, so rewriting my formula. And now I'm going to replace n with 1 and replace it a second time with 3. All right, so now once I replace n with 1, I can go ahead and just simplify that expression. So my operations here are multiply, then divide, and then add that negative. And so when I do that, she has a blood alcohol content of 0.017, which rounds to about 0.02. So now we're going to do the same thing for n equals 3. We're going to replace the value of 3 in for n, and then go through the order of operations. The operations are the same, so we're multiplying, then dividing by 60.5, and then we're going to add that negative 0.03. We end up with a value of 0.11. Okay, and then the last part of that question, which I'll leave to you, is to do the same thing, but think about how many drinks she can have so that her blood alcohol content remains 0.08. So you'll substitute in that 0.08 for B and then solve for N. So think about the operations that we took in part A and reverse them. So we had multiplied, divided, and then added, or added a negative, so you can think of that as subtraction. So we want to undo that subtraction first by adding, then undo the division by multiplying, and then undo the multiplication by dividing.